Welcome, everyone. We're letting people in a few minutes early. Thanks for joining us today. While we're waiting for the course to start today, I do have a poll question that you can use the chat to answer. So while you're joining and getting ready for us to start, please take a look at the poll question. What is your biggest takeaway from Module 2, Writing Effective Surveys? And put that in the chat and make sure it goes to everyone. And I'll repeat this a few times. So thank you for joining early. If you're joined us already and want to answer the poll question in the chat, make sure it goes to everybody. What was your biggest takeaway from last week from the Writing Effective Surveys? Hi, John. Hi, Leslie. Welcome, everybody. We're not getting started yet, but I do have a question up that if you can take a minute while we're waiting. What was your biggest takeaway from Module 2, Writing Effective Surveys? And go ahead and put that in the chat. Hi, Cindy. Thanks for answering. The percentage of returned surveys was her takeaway. John says, great discussion on effectiveness of surveys, open-ended questions. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. As we're waiting for people to come in the room, we have a poll question up. If you want to start answering in the chat, what was your biggest takeaway from Module 2, Writing Effective Questions? Thank you to those who are responding. Welcome, everyone. As we're waiting for people to join us, I have a poll question up that you can answer in the chat. What is your biggest takeaway from Module 2, Writing Effective Surveys? Thank you for all of your responses. Amy, I like that. It's not as easy as it seems on the surface, and that is correct. But you're right, with some intentionality and planning, you can get there. We're going to get started in about another minute, but as you join us today, take a look at the poll question that I have on the screen, and you can put your response in the chat. What was your biggest takeaway from my Module 2, Writing Effective Questions? Welcome to today's session. As people continue to join us, there's a poll question on the screen. What was your biggest takeaway from Module 2, Writing Effective Survey Questions? And you can put your answer in the chat. We will get started in about 1 more minute. Welcome to today's session today. I'm repeating myself for those of you who are just joining us. I have this poll question up. What was your biggest takeaway from Module 1, Module 2, Writing Effective Surveys? Thank you, everybody who responded in the chat. I see understanding how biased questions and leading questions can skew your data. Making sure you define your purpose and writing in plain language. I saw a couple responses about plain language. Getting a test survey taker. Don't make surveys more complicated, but quick, efficient, and user-friendly. Asking specific questions, how bias shows up, make them simple. So thank you so much for responding to that question today as we were waiting for everybody to come in. The second question I have, and Chelsea, if you want to go ahead and launch this, is a poll through Zoom, is have you used any of the accessibility measures you learned about in Module 1? Creating accessible documents in your day-to-day word choice in your responses. Yes, no, or you did not attend or listen to Module 1. And as you're answering, just a reminder that all of the modules 1 and 2 are available on Moodle for you to listen to, take a short quiz, and get credit for those. So we'll close it in about 5 seconds. Chelsea, if you want to go ahead and close it, and we'll share the results. So most of you, 63%, have used some of the measures that you learned about in Module 1. Great, and congratulations. It starts with one small step. 24% said no, and 13% said they did not attend. So thank you for responding to that as we are looking at both your responses and takeaways from Module 1 and 2. So welcome to today's Building Skills for Successful Program Delivery, Week 3. Today we'll be talking about using data to enhance your services. My name is Carrie Diamond, and I'm the co-director of the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. For those who are unable to see me, I'm a white female with light hair and I wear glasses. I want to recognize and thank Chelsea Beednell. She is doing all of the back-end work for this course and has been emailing and answering all of your questions that you've had on Moodle. So thank you, Chelsea, for all of your work on this course. For just some brief instructions on Zoom, everybody is muted. The session is being recorded and the materials will be available on Moodle. Closed captioning is available, so that's on the CC button at the bottom of the screen. Thank you to our captioner. We ask that you put your questions in the Q&A button rather than chat so that we can have a record of those questions, but chat is open for general comments and technical assistance. Throughout the session, we will be monitoring Q&A and we'll be stopping the presenter or interjecting those questions as they're pertinent. So please go ahead and ask those questions as they come to you, and we will interject them where they're appropriate. So let's get started. Today, using data to enhance services. Our learning objectives today include understanding the importance of data collection in your work. And data can include the survey responses that you've received after writing your great quality survey from last week, but also other tools that you might use. And you'll learn about 2 of those tools today as I demonstrate some free tools that I found that might be helpful. Analyzing the data to understand characteristics of your community. Our speaker, John, will discuss how they work to understand their community in multi-county area. And then how to apply the data collection that you've collected to enhance your services. And John will talk about that and how they've written their plans and enhanced their services. So we want to keep you engaged today. If you could launch the poll question, Chelsea, that would be great. The question is, how do you obtain data about your service area or system? And these are the options: mailed surveys, onboard surveys, feedback cards, American and community survey, or census data, whatever's provided to me, and I don't use data in my work. And I know these are just a few of the multiple options of data that you could use, but it's just some of the ones that we picked out. So we'll give that another couple minutes, or I'm sorry, seconds. So it looks like we're, give it about 10 more seconds and then go ahead and close it and share it if you would. Great, so you should see the results we have, and people could have checked more than one. About half use mailed surveys, onboard surveys, and a combination of ACS and census data, as well as what's provided to them. So that is great to know that you collect your own data, but also get it from others. We hope that some of the information that we provide to you today will also help you to figure out what you or how you can collect and add to that data. So I am very pleased today to introduce our main speaker, John Gardocki. He is a transit principal planner for the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. And so I will let John say a few more words about his role and get into his portion of the presentation today. So thank you so much, John.
Thanks, Carrie, for inviting me, and welcome to everyone from across the U.S. I come from the heartland of Columbus, Ohio, right dab in the middle of Ohio here. We are covering the Central Ohio region, which encompasses 11 counties, and it's a very unique situation as we have several rural counties as well as a large urban county, Franklin County, that I sit in. My role, I've been in public transportation planning now, going on 9 years, first with Cincinnati Metro in southwestern Ohio and with Butler County, just in between Dayton and Cincinnati. So I have a diverse background in both large and small rural transit systems. Now my role with the Regional Planning Commission is to look at transportation holistically throughout a region-wide frame instead of the normal view of one system per each county. Just so people can get to know me a little better, I am a white male, 30 with glasses, and a little beard. So next slide. So what we do with MORPC, we are the Regional Planning Commission, and we receive a couple different types of funding from the Department of Transportation. And one of those that a lot of you on the call here probably are familiar with is the 5310 funding from the Federal Transit Administration, which is funding for older adults and individuals with disabilities. And this program ranges from acquiring new accessible vehicles to purchasing transportation, mobility management programs, capital maintenance, things like that. So we oversee the urbanized formula for the Central Ohio region. We also have other federal funds that come into our MPO planning area, including congestion mitigation, air quality, surface transportation block group, and then transportation alternatives, which is mainly focused on active transportation, bicycling and walking uses. So we cover a large base of area, look at a lot of different data sets. So I'm excited to share with you how we collect things, what do we collect, and then disperse the data out for our different agencies to review. So the two big main plans that we create is the Regional Mobility Plan that I'll be talking about a little bit later. That is our human surface transportation plan, which a lot of you probably do for your own region. That's required for 5311 rural transportation funding for those in rural counties, things like that. And then we also do our short and long range transportation plans for the region. So our plan is a 30-year plan that goes out to 2050 and is saying these are the transportation infrastructure projects that are regionally significant and need to be completed in order to continue a normal flow of commerce, as well as getting people to and from their jobs, to medical appointments, etc. And so we have a plan that's $30 billion worth of projects through 2050. Next slide, please. So some of the data tools that we use here at MORPC, we are very fortunate that we have a separate data team that has the background to pull all these data sources. But within your region, there are probably many opportunities for you to pull some of these sources as well. So we do traffic modeling. And so we use HASTAS and some other nationally known models to model what is our traffic demand for different road types, as well as region-wide. How are people moving from one county to the other, and then forecasting that out into the future. So determining if a road needs expanded, or if the roadway is too large and can be reduced to provide safer alternatives for other modes, things like that. There's also a tool we use called Urban Esri. That kind of models the type of development that you can see in the future and determines if the current right-of-way is up to capacity or if you need to expand on that. That also looks at alternative transportation modes such as cycling and walking. Here at MORPC, we utilize the Esri GIS system, which is the most common system. It is not the free GIS system, but it's the most commonly used across the United States. There are a couple free GIS options if you do have the background, but might not have the budget to purchase the Esri GIS system. You can search free GIS tools and you can download those. The most commonly used free is called GRASS. The biggest pot of data that MORPC utilizes is all of the data that comes in through the U.S. Census Bureau. Now, the U.S. Census Bureau has many different types of data sets, but the most commonly used one is the American Community Survey, which does a randomized selection of Americans every year and then puts that information forward. The U.S. Census data that comes in every 10 years, the decennial census, is important as well, but it doesn't get it updated as frequently as the ACS data. We also do individual surveys. A lot of our counties are rural and don't have access to broadband, things like that. So we do have to do paper surveys, things like that. And then we also purchase data. So some of you might not realize, but when you carry around your smartphone, there are companies that are tracking your movements. And so when you use Waze and Google Maps and Apple Maps, it's tracking your data and your movement. And then those companies can then sell that data and then use that origin destination data. So it's great data. It is legal to do, and it does help plan for transportation mobility. But you do normally have to purchase that data, and I'll talk about one of the programs called Streetlight a little later. Next slide. So what data do we utilize for our 5310 program? Again, this is how we develop our regional mobility plan and that health and human services plan that everyone's required to have to receive funding. And so we use, again, origin destination data. Where are people going to? You know, that origin destination data doesn't normally tell us what they're doing, but it can show patterns if we see the same trip happen day after day. So we might know that they're going to work or to a medical appointment, etc. We look at income for households. Generally, lower income households do not have access to cars, so they do require another source of mobility. So we look at the different levels of incomes. The ACS does determine the poverty level. It does increase that through inflation and other types of indicators on an annual basis. So that does fluctuate, but generally that's below about $20,000, depending on how big your household is. We also look at minority populations, because they also tend to have or need more mobility options. Zero car households is important to look at. It also looks at one car households. You know, a lot of Americans do have a car per person, but some households only have one available in a multifamily household. So determining where those homes are that need other mobility choices is super critical for us. And we can look at heat maps to determine when a circulator route or a non-demand system might be more important than other areas. And then the ACS data also pulls information on individuals with disabilities. And this can help plan for accessible vehicles, where we deploy vehicles, etc. Next slide. So how do we collect the data that we use for the 5310 program? So we utilize the census website data as much as possible. We're utilizing the most up-to-date ACS updates every year, continually updating the plan. Even though our regional mobility plan is a 5-year plan, we go back and look at the data, update it, and see if any of those key heat selecting areas, when we layer the data, if they are changing based on that. It's also important to be aware of what level data set you are viewing. The ACS lets you go from different boundaries, including if you want to look at a whole county or a whole region, down to the smallest level, which is a census block group. Now, for rural areas, a block group is a lot bigger than what it would be for a block group in the city of Columbus, for example. But a block group has more individualized data for that area. So sometimes you want to take a look at census tracts, or you want to take a look at block groups, but the census fact finder tool will help you develop that. We also retrieve data sets from our partner agencies. While we are the MPO for the Central Ohio region, we are surrounded by a couple of other MPOs, including urban MPO to our east, which is within our regional mobility plans area. And then we have unique rural planning organizations in Ohio as well. And those were created by our governor a couple of years ago. And then we utilize departments of transportation data sets. Each state collects data on movement, whether it's freight movement, work to home origin data, things like that. So your Department of Transportation has some data sets that they can forward you. They have the staff to do that. You can ask them for select information if you don't have the GIS tool at your home base. So, and then there's other partner agencies that we work with, including the public health departments, things like that, as well as our private and nonprofit transportation providers within our region. And then the final way we collect data is we create our own surveys and utilize several collection tools. We know that we have to have a paper survey always, but we also have electronic versions that are online. It has to be both eligible for mobile and for laptop and tablets. So we look at all three of those options as well. Next slide, please. Okay, I did want to just show a couple images of our regional mobility plan survey. I know we are breaking a few survey rules with this one. It is 9 pages, but what is unique about our regional mobility plan is that we cover 9 counties, including several counties that are very rural. You know, they have different populations, Amish population that generally do not have fiber and access to internet, things that the normal people do. And so we had to craft our survey to meet every single county because we didn't want to have a different survey for every county. We wanted to have one survey. And so we developed 9 pages of survey and had it very big so that people could see and understand. So different items we asked about, of course, is age, because, you know, we're talking about older adults. So we need to know where the older adults are located, race and ethnicity. We just used the Census Bureau's way of utilizing ethnicity data. Talking about English as a second language, we need to know what they're talking, whether they need assistance. We also provided our survey in Spanish, which was the second largest speaking population. And then we also had it in Somali. Columbus is the second largest Somali population behind Minneapolis in the US. So we provided those 3 languages in the survey. Household income, again, taking a look at how much the household makes as a whole, how many people are making an income, and then asking about other household members. And then whether they have a disability requiring a mobility device is also helpful, because not all transportation providers have a accessible vehicle in every single piece of their fleet. They might have 50% of their fleet as accessible and then 50% non-accessible. So if they're seeing a jump in needing to have more accessible vehicles, they can make that transition through this survey result. Next slide. Other questions are looking at whether they work or volunteer outside the home. They do not work. They are students. That helps us determine what types of transportation they might need. We ask for their zip codes for their work and their home location, so that way we can map through the GIS tool the origin destination zip codes. Some people are not going to be willing to give you their address, so we only asked for their zip code. That allows them a little more leeway to be comfortable with supplying that information with just the zip code. How do you get to where you need to go? We provided them a table, whether they took, public transit, walked, biked, used rideshare, kiss and rides, that kind of thing. And then ask them what kind of mobility infrastructure they have in their neighborhood, which is super important, whether they have access to bike lanes, sidewalks, amenities for bus stops, sidewalk ramps, things like that. Next slide. So I did just want to have this slide in here about utilizing partnerships for data, because it's so important to utilize many different data sets when you're developing your transportation plans, looking where new services should go. And so all of these partners on here we have utilized with our regional mobility plan, and you can as well in your areas. The Jobs and Family Services um, coordination has been super critical, especially throughout this COVID pandemic, as we figure out where new jobs are, where people are getting jobs. So that way we can provide the transportation services to those locations that might not have had them in the past. So working with your State Department of Development as well is a key. Next slide. And now I will hand it back to Carrie to go through two unique tools that can help.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. It's really helpful to know all of the different data sets that you use in your work. And I think as importantly, all of the partners and who you can ask, who already collect information that might be useful to you, particularly if you don't have your own planning staff or people who work directly with data. So I'm going to talk about two tools, and the first one, I'm on slide 16 for orientation. The first one is from the Federal Highway Administration. So the current administration called for the creation of a geospatial economic justice screening tool and interactive map highlighting disadvantaged communities. So this is a fairly new tool that was done through Federal Highway Administration Office of Planning and Environment and Realty, or HEP. And they developed these interactive maps, and the ones that I want to focus on now, which I thought would be really helpful, are Title VI and environmental justice maps that use the 2015-2019 American Community Survey data and the 2020 census redistricting data. And as John had said, it's really important to know where your data sources come from. So this is an interactive website, and it is at https://hep.fhwa.dot.gov/FHWA-GIS. And I want to go through, I have a screenshot here of the drop-down menus. So a lot of this was developed around highways and roads, so that they could look at the environmental justice and Title VI concerns around roadways, but it can also be used for planning transportation services. And on this drop-down, we're looking at the 2020 Census and Equity Analysis menu, Title VI and EJ, or environmental justice maps, and there are several options under that drop-down menu. And those options, this is a listing of those options. So the first layer would be the 2020 Census and Equity Analysis, then Title VI and environmental justice. You can search on racial and ethnic populations, foreign-born populations, income, poverty measures, other vulnerable populations, which include veterans, older adults, people with disabilities, people without computers, people without internet, journeys to work, and food deserts. So you can see as the transportation sector is talking more and more about diversity, equity, inclusion, and how to design services that work for traditionally underrepresented communities, you can see how several of these maps would be really helpful to identify where these populations might be in your community. So I highlighted food deserts because I did a screenshot on slide 18 of food deserts and the number of people with disabilities. So this screenshot is a map, and it has different shading based on the number of people with disabilities. So the less shading, the lower numbers of people with disabilities. Overlaid on top of that is the food deserts, which are are striped. They have red striping on them. And for the key or legend that's here, when we're talking about food deserts, so USDA, the Treasury, and Health and Human Service set food deserts, for those who aren't familiar with the term, as tracts that are low income with a substantial number or share of residents with low levels of access to food. So low income being poverty rate of 20% or greater in that community, and low access meaning a low income tract with at least 500 people or 33% of the tracts living more than a mile away or in urban areas or 10 miles away in rural areas from the nearest supermarket or grocery store. And these are the official definitions, but we know that a mile, even a mile in an urban area can be a substantial problem if somebody doesn't have their own vehicle, a way to walk or carry groceries or to get, from one place to another, even for that mile. So that's what this particular map is showing, is the food deserts. And I happen to pick Wichita, Kansas, not for any reason, but it was just where kind of my map fell. And then on slide 19, there is a more close-up map showing, again, the food deserts and number of people with disabilities. And I wanted to show this because you can actually get down to street level data. So you can see which neighborhoods fall into a food desert that have a significant number of people with disabilities, what roads there are intersecting those communities, and where you could even overlay your transportation system if it's a fixed route or flexible route onto a map like this to see, are we serving these communities that are a food desert? So that is one of the tools that I found very helpful. And we're going to go to 2 more poll questions. So Chelsea, if you want to launch that poll, there are 2 questions here under this one. And the first one is, what category of data do you think would be most helpful from this tool in your program? And if you want to answer why in the chat, that would be great. But the answers would be racial and ethnic populations, foreign-born populations, income, poverty, other vulnerable populations, including veterans, people with disabilities, older adults. This also had information on computers and internet, journey to work, and food deserts. So take a few seconds here and respond to that poll question. The second poll question that comes up is, how do you or would you use this data, this map data, to inform your planning? And the options here are for your public transit human services transportation coordination plan, to best determine your routes and service area, to show the need to expand or improve services, for funding applications, or other. And you can put anything other in the chat. So we'll give you a little time to answer both of those questions. So if you only see one of those questions, go ahead and scroll down, and then we will share the data with everybody in just a few seconds. So we want to see which category of data might be most helpful that you think of. And then, whoops, how would you use this data? So we'll give it a few more seconds, Chelsea, and then if you want to end it and share. Thank you for participating in these polls. This is the first of the 2 questions. So I think you can see this now. I see that it looks like most people, 88%, would use the other vulnerable populations category. We also had a significant portion who would look at journey to work trips. And I have another tool I'll show you in just a minute. Food deserts was popular. Poverty areas and income were also popular in there. And then the majority of people responded to the poll said they might use this data to show the need to expand or improve their transportation. And so this is good to keep in mind as we're going forward, and your assignment for this course will be related to trying out one of these tools for your community and telling us why or how you're using those. So thank you for participating in those. We can go ahead and stop sharing that. And on slide 21, I am gonna show you one other tool that I discovered, and I'm sorry, this is slide 22 from the US Census Bureau. And John had said that they use the census data a lot, the American Community Services data, but they also have a whole census on the map data. And one of the things that I just discovered this year that you may want to check out is that I'm not a planner by nature, and so I haven't worked a lot with data, but they have on this census on the map little clips on how to use census data. And one of those clips was how to use the tool that I'm going to demonstrate now about workforce flow, and how you can understand how you might use it. Because as John had mentioned, you want to make sure that you are know where your data came from, particularly if you're going to do any comparisons, because you don't want to compare apples to oranges. Even though the numbers appear to be the same, there's a lot of differences that can be between data sources among different agencies or different sources. So this is the US Census Bureau Census on a Map. It's on https://onthemap.ces.census.gov is where you will find this. And the screenshot, again, Wichita, Kansas is where I had landed on the first time, so I stayed with that. So you can choose which area you want to do the analysis. And so you might pick Wichita County, the city. You could do different subdivisions of Wichita, and then perform an analysis in the selection area. And that comes up when you pick which area that you want to perform that on. So on slide 23, this is the mapping tool for workforce flow. And the analysis settings can include where the worker lives and where they are employed. So you can set, do you want to determine whether the area is analyzed based on where workers live, their home, or where workers are employed. So you can do either or. What labor market segment do you want? Is this all workers or a certain segment of workers? What year you want this done for, and the job type, whether it's primary job types, private job types, and there's some definitions that go along with this. So I chose work for all workers in 2019 for primary jobs and ran the analysis. And on slide 24, it's a heat map showing just one portion of Wichita County. And the lightest areas are 5 to 31 jobs, with the darkest areas of 422 to 656 jobs. So on the map around Wichita, the city, it's very heavily darkened because that's the majority of where the jobs are. And then the other parts of the map, you can see that there's other areas where are shaded a little bit darker in areas. And so that's another areas that would have a substantial number of jobs. The neat thing about this is it not only gives you the map, but it gives you some charts. So on slide 25, I have a couple charts. The first one being the job count by worker age in 2019. So it breaks it down into 3 different age categories, and that's broken down in the chart. And for the total primary jobs of 673, 143 are age 29 or younger, or 21%. 306 jobs are held by people age 30 to 54, which is 45.5%. And 224 jobs are 33% for people age 55 or older. So it breaks that down by age and percentage if you're looking for worker job counts by worker age. The other piece to this gives job counts by earnings. So if you were wondering where the lower income jobs were or lower paying jobs were, it has a bar chart here, but also the data for, again, for the 673 jobs. It breaks it down to $1,250 per month or less, which is about 18% of the jobs. $1,251 to $3,333 per month, which is about 34.5% of those jobs. And more than $333 per month is about 47.5% of the jobs within this catchment area in the analysis that I've done. So that's some of the data that you can get, and be aware of what you chose when you did the analysis setting, because you can choose whether this is a home location or whether this is the work location, and how you would want to do that and show that. And Cindy asked, if I wanted a heat map of jobs and their homes, would I need to overlay one map over the other manually? You might have to, but let me show you on this next slide what might be helpful is an option that you can choose as well. Is in that analysis, you can choose to do an inflow outflow analysis map. And this might get at what you're asking about, Cindy, is this shows the number of people coming into the area for their job, live and work in the area, and those who live in the area but work outside of the county. So in this map, we see 208 people live out of the county and work in the county. 236 live and work in the county, and 253 live in the county and work outside of the county. So you can see, as you're looking at kind of trends of where people are living, I know one of a significant issue is cross-county or cross-border transportation. And if you have, these are pretty evenly split, but I've seen maps where there's a significant amount of people, like you're talking 80% who might work outside of the county because there's just no jobs in that rural area. That could be an opportunity for some sort of new system to help get people where they need to go, to use that particular information. So I encourage you to look at these two maps, and we'll talk about your assignment for next week and kind of exploring these maps. And we'll also note that on the Census on the Map website, there are several videos that explain the ins and outs in more detail than what I've given you today. I just wanted to provide you some of the highlights to get you thinking of how you might be able to use this, and if this would be helpful in what you're doing and how you're determining your services or justifying your services, or when you're applying for new funding or trying to get new partners to the table because, hey, look, we all have a stake in getting people to their jobs both in and outside of our community. So
Carrie,
yes, go ahead, John.
Can you go back to, I think, slide 21? I just want to give a hypothetical question that I think might help her. Keep going. Sorry. Go back to the main page of on the map where you select all the options.
Yes.
Just want to give an example of how I've used this in the past. That one.
Thank you.
With my work in Butler County, which is a rural/small urban county. We had a large warehouse distribution center, and Amazon was going to come in. I know a lot of people are dealing with big warehouse districts and Amazon coming in, and we wanted to figure out where are the current employers getting their people to their where are they getting workers for them in that district. And so this tool, if you would click on the destination, it goes down into individual boundary zones. So you can look at specific census tracts, census block groups. If you have a city that's small enough, level, you can select that city, and you can click on each of those. If we're talking census tracts, you can click on that specific census tract, and it'll show you where the majority of those workers are living within that area. So that can kind of help you plan. Well, Amazon's going to have 1,000 employees. Serta, the mattress companies currently there, they get their employees from let's say, Middletown, Ohio. So you want to provide transit services from Middletown to that warehouse potentially to get the most bang for your buck out of that transportation service. So that's one example of how you can use this tool.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. So what I will do now is I will turn it back over to John to talk about a little bit about his coordination plan work and then another scenario on workforce. So thank you. Go ahead,
Yeah.
John.
Thanks, Carrie. And I did want to answer a question earlier, but the person asked, how do you address when a person gives you their zip code and the zip code falls within different cities and municipalities? So we had some of this happen with our regional mobility plan. Again, we had one survey for 9 different counties. And oftentimes in that section where we asked the zip code, they put in their area code. That's not a zip code. So we had to kind of toss that person's information out, and that does happen. If you had a smaller service area, one way I would work through that solution is to provide a map of the zip codes potentially, or a listing. Obviously, with 9 counties, we were not going to list every single zip code out. But if you are working on a small enough level, you can provide your zip codes. That way you're getting accurate information that you can then put into a mapping tool for all of that data set. So I just wanted to answer that question in case somebody else had that question as well. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how we utilize data for our coordinated plan and talk a little bit about, I'll show some of the maps and things that we utilized. So this was our first of its kind regional mobility plan that we did for the 9-county region. Normally, the human service transportation coordinated plans are done on a county by county level. Our Department of Transportation here in Ohio piloted 2 other regional mobility plans within the Dayton area, Miami Valley area, and then one with our Omega, one of the rural MPOs. And so MARPC was the third one to try this more regional mobility plan, because we are finding transportation service problems do occur across boundaries. People are going more and more to the large urban health systems, hospital systems to get cancer treatments, things like that. So there's transportation happening a lot more from hundreds of miles away. So we wanted to look holistically at what are the problems region-wide. We still have county by county goals and strategies that each county have agreed to, but this was our first look of problems that are happening across our whole Central Ohio region. Next slide. So I have some maps of the data we collected from the surveys. Again, this is the 9 counties we were looking at. So if you can see, we range from all the way over on the west side to going east. Our region is close to 2 million people here that we're looking at in this area. The Central Ohio region is going to be growing to about 3 million people by 2050. So how do we grow and provide mobility solutions to those people is critical, and that's what our plan is really doing. But on the left here is our 0-car households. So in the center there, you see Franklin County, which is the county seat of Columbus. So a large chunk is above the regional average that do not have a car in their households. But we also realized in the top left corner there in Logan County, which is extremely rural, there are also 0-car households that might be needing transportation services that they currently do not have. On the right-hand side is our workforce trip generators. So that's looking at where employees are going So as you can see, most employees are going to Central Ohio in Franklin County, downtown Columbus, some of the exurban warehouse zones. And then in all of the exurban counties, it's normally their county seat, which generally is in the middle of the county. Next slide. Two other maps we looked at. We have to, of course, look at population over 65 years old. So where are they located? That helps us determine the types of services. And then on the right is where the population people with disabilities are. And again, this is above the regional average that we are looking at. Okay, next slide, please. So the next type of data we looked at, our data team pulled down some commuting trends from 2018. We here at MORPC kind of took the COVID mobility data as kind of not wasted, but it's not, looking forward, it's not going to be useful in the long run. So we looked back in time to 2018 when trends were, back to normal, where people went into the office. So this is a Sankey diagram. It takes the origin information on the left and then puts it to the destination county on the right. And so the lines here are showing from each county where the most employer to household data is. So the thicker the line weight, the more population that is going to that county for their workforce. And so you'll see here in the middle is Franklin to Franklin. So the majority of people are staying within Franklin County because that's the biggest county in the region. But there's also a large weight line from Delaware County into Franklin County. So the county to our north, a lot of people who live in Delaware are coming to commute into Franklin counties, maybe within Columbus. So that helps us look at the different routes that we possibly need to have. Next slide. This is another Sankey diagram that utilized data from 2019 streetlight data. Streetlight is one of those companies I told you about that buys data from the cell phone companies and the mapping companies, Google Maps, Waze, Apple Maps, and then provides that data for a fee. We utilize the data with a contract through the Ohio Department of Transportation. It allows all the NPOs to utilize the data as well in Ohio. So that's how we have access to the streetlight data. If you have a metropolitan planning organization in your area, which you probably should or will have, or a Department of Transportation, they should have access to these types of data and can pull this information for you. But this is just showing, again, the same origin, destination, home to work as the last one did. And again, it's showing approximately the same information just 1 year later. It will be interesting to see how this home to work data is seen as people go back to work. I know myself, I'm a hybrid employee permanently, so I'm only working in the office 3 days a week versus 5. So for regional transit authorities or nonprofits doing workforce transportation, it's totally throwing a wrench into our plans, and we are having to reanalyze our services and what they do. There's also a look at service hours, because a lot of the jobs are 24-hour, 3 shifts, 3 potential shifts. So most transit agencies don't offer a 3rd shift option and are considering, instead of having, the peak shift services that are not effective anymore, maybe they should provide 24-hour services instead. So that's one of the ways we're reviewing that. Next slide. So enhancing transportation services from data collection, how we are looking at this. Layering data collection to determine hotspots is critical to seeing where barriers exist. So we can take all of our survey, collection that we found, the zero-car households, older populations, disabilities. We can use that GIS tool and layer each of those data sets to determine where the hotspots are, where the ideal transit user or person who needs more mobility options exists. And then each type of data can correspond to types of services that may be lacking. It can tell you what type of vehicle you need, whether it needs a ramp, a wheelchair ramp, etc. Affordability. Can users actually pay for your services? If you offer more than one type of service, a fixed route service, that's $2 a trip, or, an on-demand system that's $5 a trip, or a certain per mile cost. You can see, well, if there's a large population of low-income people here, maybe it doesn't make sense to offer the on-demand type services, but a more reliable fixed route service that costs $2. That's the way to go. Coverage, looking at areas where mobility services may not be needed. Some transportation agencies cover the entire county and are putting vehicles out in areas and having them sit for hours on end where they're not being utilized, and can utilize them in other areas. And then capital allocation, where should facilities get placed to be efficient? If you're covering a large area and only have one operation and maintenance facility, it might make sense to put a small outpost out farther in the county if you're spending a lot of your time out there, and a small staff. That way you're not wasting those deadhead miles going from out in the county into where your facility is located. So that's some of the ways that we are utilizing our data collection. Next slide. So I wanted to show an example of one of the counties in our regional mobility plan. I selected Delaware County because it is our fastest growing county in the state. It has gone from a rural county to a small urban county within the last 20 years. It has also gone from a rural transit system to a large urban transit system, and are experiencing the growing challenges that a lot of agencies are seeing. They don't have a local transit sales tax or a local transit source of funding. So they're trying to provide as many services as they can without a local permanent source of funding. So you see some of the strategies on the left there, expanding services for disadvantaged populations, encouraging flexible policies to improve transit accessibility, and increasing awareness of programs and services are some of the things that they will be looking at over the next 4 years of this plan. And so each county has specific goals and strategies. And then we also have regional goals and strategies. One of the things facing Central Ohio, which really is happening across the nation, is we just can't get people to operate our vehicles. So we cannot put out the services that people need if we do not have the employee capital to put those services out. So how are we going to fix that as a region? So that's one of our regional goals. Next slide. So this is an example of our survey data that we collected. It was put into an Excel sheet, put into a format that could then be uploaded into a GIS system if we wanted to map it. But we also utilize the Microsoft services that puts things into pie charts and graphs and things like that. So the pie chart on the left shows employment status. showing whether they work outside of the home, work in the home, are retired, do not work, or are a student. The pie chart on the left is the awareness of public transportation or services within their community. Majority are aware of it. Some of them do not use it. Excuse me, but then some are not aware of it at all. So that tells the county that they might need to do an awareness campaign to show what services are available for people. Next slide. This is showing the age distribution in Delaware County. Again, we had paper survey and electronic surveys possible. And so we had a larger majority of the younger population, which tends to be more electronic savvy, answer these questions, but that's okay. It's important to know what each age distribution needs in mobility wise. Next slide. This question was about requested service changes, what they needed to be a transit rider. Some of them are looking at services on weekends, services starting earlier in the morning or running later into the evening, riding to destinations outside of the county that they're currently in, the ability to request a trip on an app or over the phone are just some examples of things that were requested. Next slide. Public transportation hindrances here. This gave them a couple options that they could choose from that are a hindrance to them getting onto public transportation. So it's not available where they live. You know, normally Americans are willing to walk about 1/4 of a mile to a public transit stop. So if it's outside that boundary, you know, it's not really accessible to you. They don't know what transportation options are available. And some just answered they have their own car and prefer to drive, which is fine. We want to know every hindrance to public transit. Next slide. Okay, let me see if there's any questions that I haven't answered.
I don't think we have any questions for you at this time, John.
Okay, perfect. And our regional mobility plan is available on our website. That's at www.morpc.org/mobility plan. And so you'll be able to look through our plan, see what we did. The survey is there if you want to steal the survey or take bits and pieces from it. Happy to see that go into work throughout the rest of the country there. So, okay. Next, I want to talk a little bit more about another one of our roles here at MORPC. Looking at how we're trying to solve the Ohio workforce issue of getting people to jobs. So the problem area employers cannot get enough workforce to their locations. You know, we have highly concentrated towards the distribution, warehousing, and manufacturing industries, especially in our exurban counties around Franklin County. Often these are just massive distribution centers, oftentimes out in the middle of cornfields. They do not have sidewalks put in. They have these massive parking lots in front of their buildings. And if they have a transportation service, you know, you get dropped way off at the front of the complex and have to walk. So the solution, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, as well as the Central Ohio Transit Authority, which is our main urban system here in Central Ohio, is working on a tool called County Connections. And it's a multi-county transit coordination plan that targets key operational segments of transit agencies and private providers to solve mobility barriers. Because not all of our counties have a regional transit agency or transit board. Some of the counties have, a health board that is doing some of the on-demand transportation services, or they have, individual employers or nonprofits that are doing the transportation for them. And so with CODA knowing that rides are being requested through counties, we're trying to expand CODA's operational ability to help our counties surrounding us. And so we looked at 3 different options, including communication, whether there's just a communication problem between the agencies, whether we need to coordinate more on our services, providing a transit hub in a certain location where people can transfer. That's an option of coordination, or then collaboration if there needs to be something more on a bigger frame, such as sharing procurement services or utilizing vehicle share, things like that. So I'll go through an example again using Delaware County as our example. Next slide. So this is a Delaware County on the left. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but the grid on the left is showing these census tracts within Delaware County. You'll see the cities. The city of Delaware there is called out in the middle. That's the county seat of Delaware County. And then at the bottom there, that dashed black line is the current boundaries of the Central Ohio Transit Authority. So they do provide some services within Delaware County. How you read the coloration is the darker I'm colorblind, so it looks red to me. Darker the red is more transit need, and then darker the purple is more transit potential. So as you can see here, the whole city of Delaware pretty much is dark red and dark purple. So there's need for microtransit services. And then in the southern portion of the county, where the second largest population generators and some of the big workforce generators are as well, shows need for microtransit possibilities. How this data was determined is utilizing the key demographic indicators for transit-oriented populations on the right. And again, it's just using all those ACS data sets that we talked about: low-income households, 0-car or 1-car households, senior populations, youth. Delaware County Transit is providing a huge service for the youth populations, getting from soccer practice or band practice to home. They're providing those services and are actually seeing ridership increases past what they were seeing pre-pandemic right now. So looking at minority populations, and then again the disabled populations. And so we hired a consultant, HDR, who compiled all this information and has a special tool to do the microtransit suitability analysis here on the left. But we did this for each specific county, and then provided solutions for microtransit services within that county. As a lot of these counties don't have the ability to do fixed route transit, it just doesn't make sense for them. So next slide. So these are the types of things that we're looking at doing. Again, County Connections Playbook was just published early in 2022. So we're just starting the kickoff of this, and we're going county by county. As we looked at 7 different counties within our region, a lot of them need the same things, but some differ. So the things on the left that we're looking at, seeing if there's communication, coordination, or collaboration solutions to is regional service planning and scheduling. A lot of people are still scheduling, on paper, don't have the access to the online service planning and scheduling software that's available now. regional fare policy and integrating fare systems. We're looking at how people don't have to purchase, they're going from Delaware County to Dakota. How can they have one pass instead of having to purchase two different passes on that system? Dakota has a cashless system where they have smart cards that they can load at CVS's and Walgreens and Kroger's and things like that. How do we implement that policy in rural counties as well? Common technologies and passenger information systems. Getting real-time information is critical to people. So as Americans, we love our freedom and don't want to be wasting our time. So being able to track vehicles, things like that is important. Excuse me. Sorry. We had an 80-some degree weather day, and now it's like 40 degrees. So of course I have a cold. Marketing and rider information tools, looking at how we can brand things together to be more cohesive, so it's not as hard to determine how to transfer from one system to the other. Procurement and capital planning is surprisingly hard to do. There's a lot of federal regulations, and some of these smaller systems just don't have the ability to do procurement. So how do we purchase buses, at the price point that a large system can get buses at, and assist the smaller agencies to get those vehicles faster and at a cheaper cost. Looking at passenger facilities and mobility hubs, where do we connect? Having resources for those people at those locations. We're building a regional mobility center in the southern portion of Franklin County, and one of our distribution centers that connects to Pickaway County to our south. Looking at the 3 counties coming together with their transit authorities and having daycare options and restrooms, potentially a bank where employees can go and check their cash their checks, things that most people don't think of that are really needed by people who utilize our services. Shared administrative services, training and knowledge center. A lot of the smaller systems don't have planners or might not have the financial people or procurement staff members on their team. So how do we share those services? A training center. How do we cross-train drivers or mobility managers, things like that. And then a regional on-demand service platform, connecting everyone onto the same on-demand service platform so they can schedule trips with different agencies. And then a regional data sharing platform that would be able to share trip origin destination data, that kind of thing. So I know that's a lot of information, and I'm really excited to share this County Connections playbook, and we're excited to start this work and see where it goes. So I think that was my last slide. Is that right, Carrie?
Yes, I couldn't unmute myself fast enough. Thank you so much, John, for giving us all that practical ways that you're using this information, the data that you collected and the ways that you're using it, and how you're interacting with other MPOs, other counties, other systems, and other areas throughout Ohio. So we have one more question before we get to the final final assignment and any other questions that you have. And this should be active for you. Does your service area have multiple transportation providers? Yes, no, or unsure. And do they share data? Yes, no, unsure, or we do not have multiple transportation providers. So you should see both questions. You can scroll down if you're only seeing one, and we'll give you just a few minutes, seconds to do that. I thought it was really great how John highlighted other programs and agencies that have that transportation, as well as other transportation providers who could help and share that. So we'll give it just a few more seconds, and then you can close and share those. Good point, Alyssa. Some share, some don't. So we should have had a third option. But we have the results. Most of you, 83%, have multiple transportation providers, whether they're public, private, nonprofit providers. And do they share data? So almost 40% said no. Another 30% said unsure, with only about 20% saying yes. So I think some may have said yes, some do, some don't, but I think that might be an opportunity. So many of you have multiple organizations that you could potentially work across, at least see what they use. And there may be information that you can share as well. I know I used to work for an aging unit, an aging and disability resource center at the local level. And we had to have data collection on older people and people with disabilities in our community that we had in our own plans that we would have gladly shared if somebody asked. We just didn't know who needed that data. So I think that's out there more than you think it is. And so thank you for responding to that question. We can stop sharing that. And we will open this up for questions if there are any, but before we do, I want to make sure that everybody has, well, actually before the final assignment, I'd like to open it up for any other questions that people have. I know we don't have any right now, but I do have one for you, John. When we were talking about the workforce data, we have a lot of people who are now working remotely. And how does that impact that origin destination information that you're getting, that people are getting, and should they be considering that when they're looking at that data?
Yeah, so it depends on what data you're utilizing. So like if you're going to use 2020 to 2021 data, I would just throw it out. Honestly, the new data that's coming out for 2022 is going to be more useful to see. Again, the ACS data only surveys a portion of the people every year, so we won't get another look at census data until 2032-ish. So we're still determining how that's going to be, but overall, I mean, in the Columbus area alone, our peak times are not the old peak times are not the peak times currently. I mean, we pretty much have traffic, steady traffic, but not as wall-to-wall traffic. We have steady traffic throughout the day. So people are out and about more often now than they were. Some people are able to be hybrid. Some people leave for their lunch when they're working at home to do other errands, things like that. So there's not the wall-to-wall peak hour traffic times any longer. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the new streetlight data and things we get back later this year.
Thank you. And Karen noted in the chat that they share their data through the Regional Transportation Coordinating Council advisory boards. And many regions, states, local communities have a variety, variation on the Transportation Coordination Council. It might be a county-based, it might be regional, it might be, more of a statewide coordinating council, but that is a really great suggestion, an area where you can at least talk about and share the data that you have. And Marilyn mentioned that they have an open source data portal, and every citizen can get into it. And that's a really great and transparent way to highlight some of your program, who you're serving or where you're serving, and all of the data that you use in your programming. So I'm not seeing any other questions at this point, but you can please put those in the Q&A if you have any. We will go through the final assignment for this module. So, and this will be in Moodle. And just a reminder to get the certification of completion for this full course, you will need to view all all of the 4 sessions. If you can't do that live, you can do that as recording and take the short quiz afterwards. And then have your assignments uploaded. And those are uploaded kind of on a pass-fail basis. But for this session, I want you to practice one of the data tools presented in this model. Create an analysis for your area, region, county, what you determine which area. And for your assignment, write a paragraph explaining what you used and how you will or could use this data to enhance your program. So we showed you the tools, so practice with some of the tools, and then kind of how John outlined how they've been using the data in their program. How are you or could you use that data in your program? So to find the assignment in Moodle, you go to the module for this course, Using Data to Enhance Services. Under the description, click on Assignment Using Data Tools, and then click the file to download the fillable form. Once you've filled that out, then you upload it. We're asking that you complete that by May 4th. Those deadlines are to keep you on track. There is a little grace period where we'll completely close the session close the whole course sometime in mid-May. And you really have up until then to submit all of your courses to get the certificate of completion. Any questions, you can contact Chelsea at cbeadnell@easterseals.com. So this session, the PowerPoint will be available. We did add a couple more data resources. The MORPC mobility plan link is here. Another tool that we did not use, but may have some applicability, and you can use this as one of your assignment tools, is the Index on Housing and Transportation Affordability Index. It's a comprehensive view of affordability, including the cost of housing and transportation at the neighborhood level. So are people spending a lot more of their income on housing and or transportation? You can do it together or separately, than they should be. And that's what that tool tells you. There's also another Federal Highway Administration screening tool for equity analysis of projects, or STEEP. It doesn't get as involved as the one that we looked at today, but that one's available. Another place for some data you could look at is the AARP Livability Index. So this scores different neighborhoods and communities on several different livability factors. Transportation is one of those, but it also scores it on housing, the neighborhood, the environment, health, engagement, and the opportunities available for people who live there. And then I wanted to point you to this presentation from the US Census Bureau for those of you who are writing grants and other applications. They have a presentation on using census data in grant writing, which is, I know a lot of us have to write grants to continue our programs, and that might be useful as you're going forward. So we have our presenters' contact information here, both mine and John's, and we'll welcome any questions that you have about the content. I'm not seeing any more questions at this point, but you can email us. This is our general information here. We ask that you join us next week, where Jeremy Johnson Miller, NADTC staff, will lead the discussion with our guest speakers about how to meet the needs of your community. So with that, we thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to John for your presentation and sharing your work and knowledge with us. And we thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you next week at our final module within the building skills class. Thank you very much.